Hello there. Welcome again to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Good to see you, Eric, again.
Bob, here we go. This actually will probably be the end of the year show for us. By the time it airs on 29 December, which is early part of next week, things will have changed slightly, but I'm sure the big story in the New York area is still going to be the assassination of the two New York City police officers, Lou and Ramos.
Right, in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Right. The historical perspective on all the stuff leading up to that, of course, we'll get into. What we'd like to do is to try to set a tone that speaks to the loss of those families.
Yes.
Because on this show we always talk about a lot of wrongs going out in our society, global, local, national, but one wrong pitted against another wrong never makes a third right.
Correct. It never adds up that way.
And so the fact that someone who is probably mentally disturbed, or was probably mentally disturbed based on some of the records that's come out on him, decided to be, I quote, vindictive and vengeance-minded and shoot two unsuspecting police officers makes for a seriously bad situation, totally, not just in the city of New York.
I mean, I couldn't believe when the news broke on Saturday how badly it poisoned it seemed like a building atmosphere of upcoming cooperation, and this just drove a dagger through all of that. Even though we did have the dust-ups between the mayor and the PBA and other organizations in the city, it seemed like the framework was getting set for some level of dialogue when this happened, and all of a sudden the dialogue disappeared into diatribes and rhetoric, and we sort of lost it.
Give me your take on where this was starting to become more dialogue, because the rhetoric from the PBA spokesman, Lynch, I never found one bit of reconciliation in any of his particular statements.
No, the dialogue didn't come from him. And as I said before on this show, he's a dinosaur. He comes from a time when the actions of the police were rubber stamped by the city of New York, and anything the police did was okay. He has taken no steps towards reconciliation. He's been the one shoving the coals into the fire to make the divides in the city worse, even worse than it was going into this terrible weekend. And my heart broke so badly when I heard the news of the two innocent police officers doing nothing but actually there to help the community with extra policing, which is what the community had requested and they got. And for reasons which we will never know, this person comes up from Baltimore and kills them. And the word is correct, assassinates them.
Oh yeah, they're loosely tossing around ambush. This was no ambush. Those men were sitting out in plain view, plain sight in their patrol car. This individual just walked up to them. He did not ambush them. He just assassinated them by walking up to them and pointing a gun and shooting them.
Right.
So to be correct, it was an assassination.
I mean, since you asked, I think when you asked where the dialogue and the chance for reconciliation was coming from, I think it was coming from the mayor's office.
Okay, all right.
I mean, in case you were wondering.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And I have to give the mayor really kudos for the way he's handled the situation, because there is no doubt that he's walking a serious tightrope. He was walking a serious tightrope before the assassination because of the huge demonstrations that took place in the city of New York as a result of those non-indictments of those two cases, one in Ferguson, Missouri, and one right here in New York, the Garner and the Michael Brown cases. And so basically, and I heard part of his news conference where he said he was getting calls from around the country about the fabulous handling by the NYPD of those huge demonstrations,
Right.
where they allowed the New York City populace to actually deal with peaceful demonstrations to voice their concern about what they see as a total injustice.
Right.
And they handled it extremely well, and he was giving them praise for that.
Right. And I gave kudos for the way it was handled. The large crowds were allowed to vent. And they did block traffic, they did get on the FDR, they did do a number of things that disrupted the city, but the restraints shown by the police during those demonstrations was just epic. I mean, it really set a point in police-community relations, just sort of a showcase of how to do it well. And it's difficult, because people are screaming at you and cursing at you and it's insulting you as you try to help them along. It's difficult. I give the police kudos for that.
I'm with you on that. So for Patrick Lynch to get up and spew the kinds of look,
Venom.
let's just get the venom is the correct word, but this guy was screaming stuff like that blood on the hand starts at the steps of City Hall and the office of the mayor. After the funerals, those responsible will be called on the carpet and held accountable. This is from an AP story written by Colleen Long, as she's talking about Lynch and his particular response to what's been going on. Just days before officers Lou and Ramos were shot to death in their car, Lynch had suggested officers sign a petition barring the mayor from attending their funeral should they die on the job. There's nothing peaceful in reconciliation about this man's rhetoric.
And it's not at all constructive. And that's kind of what we need at the moment. At least, if you can argue, but be constructive, and that does nothing to help the situation.
Let me not just beat up on Lynch, okay? The reason why he's the poster child, but the bottom line, Rudolph Giuliani pops up on the Sunday talk shows blaming Obama, blaming the mayor. Pataki shows up on whatever, Twitter, in case you folks don't even remember that name. That's the one-time Republican governor who folks don't even remember he existed as governor.
Even though he served multiple terms.
Yes, but made little or no dent on the effect of the state, in my estimation.
Okay.
That's an opinion.
Okay.
Other people might think otherwise. Now he may be mulling a run for the presidency from what left field anyway. The Republican field is already scattered. So Pataki might as well jump in. He's trying to beat up on the president and the mayor.
Right.
I mean, and so somebody says to the governor who, quote, playing peacemaker, Andrew Cuomo, well, what do you have to say about Lynch and his rhetoric? He says, instead of condemning that kind of rhetoric, he waffles on the subject, but says, but we need to have calm and let's be peaceful here and let's, whatever waffling statements he made, the fact that he didn't condemn Lynch's rhetoric tells me he's another one of these opportunistic guys trying to play both sides. That's me, personal opinion.
Okay, but that does reflect my disappointment with Andrew Cuomo. Even during his campaign, he sort of cakewalked it. He didn't face the issues. He didn't want to debate. He didn't want to get his hands dirty. As much as I don't like the governor from across the river, Chris Christie, he does it.
At least he will get out there and debate with his opponents and at least talk about the issues. Andrew Cuomo says, oh no, I can mail this one in. I do not want to give my opponent a platform to air some very valid criticism and deal with some very substantive issues. So yeah, you're right. He tried to mail it in, and yeah, I call that not waffling. I call that running and hiding. That's what I call that.
Now, did you happen to see the New York Times response to Pataki and Giuliani in their editorial?
If you got something on it, share it with our viewers.
After praising the way Mayor de Blasio handled it, I'll just read one graph, and that should give the flavor of it. We want to hear more of this from Mr. de Blasio, who needs to be the grown-up in a conversation so dominated by puerility. Irresponsible voices are poisoning this debate. George Pataki, a former New York governor, said that divisive anti-cop rhetoric from Attorney General Eric Holder Jr. and Mr. de Blasio inspired the killing of the two officers. Rudolph Giuliani, a former mayor of New York City, spread the falsehood that Mr. de Blasio had let the protests get out of control. In parentheses, they have been amazingly peaceful. Raymond Kelly, a former New York police commissioner, falsely accused Mr. de Blasio of running an anti-police platform. Mr. de Blasio is right when he insists that harmony is possible. Hating police brutality and respecting the police are not contradictory impulses. And that's a very good point the Times makes.
The Times hit it perfectly. It's interesting because there are two people not in the news business, not in politics, but who are high-profile individuals, and they're diametrically opposed to where they are. Jon Stewart, Daily Show, pretty much said that last quote that the Times went, you can be against bad things by bad police officers, I'm paraphrasing, and still support police and policing. So they're not diametrically opposed.
No, you can have both in a good society.
The actor James Woods is busy all over the Twitter sphere tweeting all kinds of anti-Al Sharpton, cop-hating, venom-spewing all kinds of stuff, totally poisoning the well of substantive debate. So between an actor who actually admire his work as an actor and a comedic, now pretty decent film director, I haven't seen the film, but I've heard good things about it. I would say one's a grown-up, one's a child.
Right.
As the Times, to paraphrase the Times. Yes. One's a grown-up, one's a child. So it's the interesting thing, what's lost in all this poisonous stuff are the families of the individuals who have been going through the suffering caused by all of this stuff.
Right.
Because if you look at it, the cops, the two slain officers, just before the holidays, their families are totally devastated. The Garner family, the Brown family, even though that's not just before the holidays, they've lost fathers, sons, brothers. Those families have to deal with this kind of serious, serious tragedy. And Michael Brown may have been a, quote, bad person in the eyes of the law for whatever shoplifting thing he might have taken part in. But shoplifting is not a passport to loss of life.
Right.
Especially if you don't even get a trial on whatever that supposed crime was that you committed.
Right. And equally, nobody...
Eric Garner, there's a charge, an allegation of selling loose cigarettes.
Right.
The other report I read, he basically broken up a fight between two individuals. There wasn't anything about, none of the witnesses said they saw him selling any cigarettes. And so they're talking about the proximate cause, and all those folks over here, I want to say the hard right protesting, everyone else protesting lack of justice. I'm at a loss for words to understand why they're trying to equate peaceful protests for perceived injustice to a cry for the killing of police officers. There's a story here.
Yes,
go ahead.
I mean,
I'm going to look it up.
Right. Well, and the coverage of it, as we know, depending on where you're looking, varies widely. As you know, I'm big in tech. I like my social media, but I don't like it abused or used for primary reporting. And a lot of the coverage has been of that vein. Even with the latest shooting, the Instagram account of the shooter was used immediately. Usually, I mean, I guess it is his page, but in the beginning, in the first few minutes, when it's not vetted, that was sort of put out there as fact, and that troubled me.
How did they word it?
Well, in the Instagram post, there was a lot of anti-cop rhetoric in his Instagram. His post.
The shooter.
Yes, the shooter's post.
Yes. There was no doubt about the fact that he put that stuff up on his page.
Right. But whenever you have an instance like this, it's good to wait to make sure it's the page. I don't know how well it was vetted before it was put out there. It turned out to be correct in this case.
you know, you're right, because those people always try to be fast and
Right.
try to be.
It turned out to be correct in this case. So many times it's a fake Twitter or a fake Facebook page that gets aired, and then it's like, oh, we're sorry, we got it wrong. In this case, it turned out to be right, but I didn't like the way the initial reporting was handled. And then we have, and of course, it's hard to talk about a news organization and Fox in the same sentence.
The fake news folks,
Right.
yeah.
And I haven't heard it reported anywhere else, but Fox was reporting that people were applauding at the scene of the cop shooting. And I've heard that
Here in New York.
Here in New York,
Yeah,
and I've
yeah,
at the scene
yeah.
as the story broke.
As the story broke, right.
I've heard that reported nowhere else, and it troubles me the way Fox has
Yeah.
spun this. And of course, they're the ones that aired Giuliani and a few of the other comments right away.
Okay, on that point, because we aggregate, we
Right.
cull the web. The progressive side of the web blogs, Daily Kos is one of those progressive sides.
Sure.
They had a very interesting take. You remember the rally in March that Reverend Sharpton helped kick off a couple of weeks ago? By the time this airs, it was a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
It was in the Washington.
Right. The march that he
Baltimore
organized
area, right.
over a few weeks in
Right.
Washington.
Right.
Correct.
Well, here's a Daily Cops report on what the Fox local station did to that march and rally. Monday, December 22nd is the dateline on the Daily Cops show. Go kill a cop chant a fake, duplicitous editing job by Fox affiliate. The cause byline is somebody who goes on by in the know.
Okay.
But this, and he posted the videos, because the bottom line was this rally, held in Washington, D.C., called the National Justice for All March, was broadcast on C-SPAN. And at one point in the video, there's a rally organizer, can be heard chanting, this is the quote, "We won't stop, we can't stop until the killer cops are in cell blocks."
Okay.
That's the actual
That's the
quote
quote.
that C-SPAN aired. We won't stop, we can't stop until the killer cops are in cell blocks. The Baltimore affiliate Fox 45 reporter then reports this after some deceptive, misleading audio editing as, "We won't stop, we can't stop until kill a cop." She actually reports that edited audio is what the marchers were chanting.
Okay.
This is a report that she
Okay.
puts on the air.
Okay.
So now this is not,
That's scary.
this is propaganda. This is outright lying. This is not journalism. Now, we know Fox is a fake news
we've
organization
caught them
on the
there
national
before.
level, but it looks like all their local affiliates are as bad as the national people. This is crazy.
We've caught them in something like this before. If you remember the rallies in Madison, Wisconsin, after the Cheechas lost their rights, there's a short clip of a union organizer shoving folks while trying to organize a rally. And in the background, there are palm trees.
Yeah.
There are no palm trees in Madison, Wisconsin.
right?
So that was
phony
used
video,
as
right.
ostensibly
Bad audio.
rabble rousers brought in.
But interesting enough, here's the key comment from the Daily Kos comment section on that story. And the guy who wrote the comment is a fellow by the name of Eric K. That was his signature. He said,
Okay.
they got what they needed. The people they wanted to rile up got riled up. The story is out there and will be circulated as proof of the evil intent of people trying to rein in the militarized, racist, and unaccountable police. That's how this con works. They lie, the lie gets out there, and even if they're called on it and issue a correction, the lie is still out there doing the work it was intended to do all along.
Absolutely.
This guy is astute. He knows exactly how they plan to spin that stuff, what their intent is. And you know what? There were some other comments on that blog, and it's the first thing that popped into my head. This is an FCC matter. You cannot go out there and misrepresent news stories like this without somebody at least thinking about challenging your license.
Absolutely.
Somebody needs to put a direct challenge to that station license for that Fox affiliate in Baltimore.
Right. And that's a simple matter. You and I have done that. You have done it more than me. But it's a simple matter of getting your letter to the FCC to report what a local affiliate did. It must get read.
And somebody needs to launch the campaign
right.
to
But
challenge the
it
license.
has to be done locally. Correct.
Yes, somebody in that market needs to launch a campaign to challenge that license. So I don't know. We got about 8 minutes left.
Right.
All this stuff that's come in, you have to understand that we never condone violence, period. We just don't condone violence. One of the things that we try to put in perspective is the historical context for a lot of the stuff that's going on. And we've done it on this show more than once. And there's such a thing. There was a gentleman who testified before Congress about 3 weeks ago about the fact that there's a perception that black lives are not worth the same as white lives. I mean, this was congressional testimony. I mean, basically on the studies that they've done, historical trend lines, that's basically the nature of the beast. What we know from our own historical stuff that we've done documentary-wise, we know this is a legacy that comes out of the legacy of slavery. We know that there were black codes that were put in as a form of social control to contain the enslaved population and, by extension, the freed black population.
Sure.
That's been historically the case. The 14th, 13th Amendments that were supposed to be designed to give black people their rights and their free association and their full citizenship have all been abrogated by state laws, and the voting rights issues that came up when they got their right to vote have all
We've seen an amazing
back.
mangling of the voter participation laws, but go ahead.
When we were discussing the last show, the young lady had written that whole course of historical context about white pushback, white rage, not anti-cop protest, white rage. This is the kind of historical context that people need to understand. Just deal with the police alone, all right? Reuters did a survey. The headline report just came out, the story today, Tuesday. This is the Tuesday before Monday we aired. Off-duty black cops in New York feel threat from fellow police.
I saw the same article.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to look into it. Go ahead.
Now, we're not talking, the other issue that is undercover black cops run the risk of getting killed by white cops just because the white cops think that they are criminals. They are policemen, but their white counterparts actually think that they are criminals just because of their skin color.
I don't have the details in my head, but I can recall at least 2 subway shootings of that vein.
That's about 10, 12 years ago.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
But there have been John Jay, Professor Dolores Jones Brown cited a 2010 New York State Task Force report on police shootings. The first such inquiry of its kind found that in the previous 15 years, that's leading up to 2010, officers of color had suffered the highest fatalities in encounters with police officers who mistook them for criminals.
Okay.
So now you wear this badge, you try to do your best to help your community, and you're risking your life just because of your skin color. Never mind the fact that your profession is dangerous.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's a tough profession to begin with, and God knows I give a lot of credit to anyone who puts on the badge. Right. It's not an easy job, but as you were saying, it's from within the department.
Within the department,
you feel the threat.
The Reuters story didn't deal with the undercover. She was dealing with black officers who are now off duty. They're not in.
I see what you're saying.
What? So
we're not even talking about the off-duty undercover subject.
All these people, when they're not in uniform, just because they're black, boom. Right. This is a Michelle Conlon, Reuters reporter who did the thing. She said,
it was
all but one. And this is 25. Okay. All but one said that when off duty and out of uniform, they had been victims of racial profiling, which refers to using race or ethnicity as grounds for suspecting someone having committed a crime. Okay. Officers said this included being pulled over for no reason, having their heads slammed against their cars, getting guns brandished in their faces, being thrown into prison vans, and experiencing stop and frisk while shopping. Okay. The majority of the officers said they had been pulled over multiple times while driving. 5 had had guns pulled on them.
Okay.
I mean, the black officer in interview said they had been racially profiled by white officers exclusively. And about 1/3 said they made some form of complaint to a supervisor. That didn't do much good because guess what? Their supervisor either dismissed the complaints or retaliated against them by denying them overtime, choice assignments, or promotions.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
But it just goes to prove that the dialogue is needed. There's so much historical perspective here that's not being understood and grasped.
That's recent perspective.
Right, and we're getting the rhetoric, and we're getting the snap decisions, and we're getting the name calling, especially from Mr. Lynch, and we're not getting the reasoned, well, now we're getting some of the reasoned reports out of it. We don't have time for it. But with about 2
minutes left,
2.5 minutes left, maybe you might want to.
Yeah, you know, it's part commentary, part report. Some of this stuff is actually institutionalized by the governments and not just, it's not just individual cops. It's not.
Right.
There was a story that broke just the other day about a 14-year-old boy in South Carolina who actually just got pardoned or got his conviction
Right.
exonerated.
If you can find
70 years after South Carolina
Right.
sent a 14-year-old black boy to the electric chair in the killings of 2 white girls in a segregated home, a judge threw out the conviction, saying the state committed a great injustice. The kid was 14 years old. They had to put a telephone book on the electric chair because he was so small and so
my
frail.
goodness.
They did. The trial lasted 3 hours. There was never an appeal. This kid was
And it was-
executed. You
right.
know, and that's because he was a black male child who these people were afraid of. Afraid of? Maybe?
Right.
No, somebody had to die because these 2 white girls got raped. So that's the kind of intense disregard for black lives that has occurred in this country for 400 years, folk. And the cops that we have are not serving and protecting black communities. They are an invading force in black communities. They want to get home to their wives and families without losing their lives. And because they're in predominantly black and brown communities, they're at fear for those lives because there's a perception in white America, another study that we don't have time to quote for, that you look at black male and you automatically associate it with crime. We'll talk about that in future broadcasts.
And I mean, I agree. There's so much more here that needs to be understood and grasped. When I see the young cops come out of the police academy, I wonder whether they're getting the right understanding of how to deal with communities, that haven't always been the friends of policing. Okay, we're about out of time. So
before we go, think about all those other families that are suffering.
Yes, God bless
folks
them.
in Gaza, the Mexican families, the people dying of Ebola, all those folks around the globe. This has been Media Watch. I'm your host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
Thanks to M&N and EVT Educational Productions.